Before the railroad, America felt endless. A man could leave New York for California and vanish somewhere between the rivers, deserts, and mountains without a trace. Wagon trails dissolved into wilderness. Snow buried entire expeditions alive. Travelers died of thirst, staring at horizons that never seemed to move. The continent was so vast, so violent, that it barely felt like one country at all. Then came an idea so ambitious it bordered on insanity. Build a railroad across the entire nation. Not across a state, not across a region, across a continent. In the years after the American Civil War, the United States was desperate to bind itself back together. Politicians promised prosperity. Investors smelled fortunes buried in steel. Engineers warned the plan could fail spectacularly. Between the East and the Pacific stood deserts, lawless plains, and mountain ranges that looked almost designed to stop mankind from crossing them. But America had entered an age where ambition had begun overpowering fear, and soon thousands of workers would begin hammering steel into the wilderness, trying to force a fractured nation together, one railroad tie at a time. The railroad was never just a construction project. It was a race fueled by money, pride, and raw ambition. In 1862, as the American Civil War still raged, President Abraham Lincoln approved a plan that split the impossible task between two companies. Central Pacific Railroad would build eastward from California. Union Pacific would build westward from the Missouri River. Somewhere in the middle, the rails would meet. But there was a dangerous catch. The government paid the companies by the mile. Every track laid meant more land, more money, and more power. Suddenly, the railroad became a furious sprint across the continent. Crews worked day and night, driving spikes into the earth, while executives fought for territory like rival empires. Surveyors cut paths through wilderness no railroad had ever crossed before. The faster they built, the richer they became. And soon, the American frontier itself would begin bending around the sound of hammers and steel. For the workers of the Central Pacific Railroad, the Sierra Nevada mountains rose like a wall at the edge of the world. Granite cliffs towered above them. Winter storms buried camps beneath feet of snow. Entire crews vanished inside whiteouts so thick the mountains seemed to erase men from existence. Yet, the railroad kept advancing, inch by brutal inch. To carve tunnels through solid stone, workers dangled in baskets over frozen cliffs, drilling holes by hand into the mountainside. Then came the black powder. Explosions thundered through the valleys as rock shattered into deadly storms of debris. Later, they began using nitroglycerin, a new explosive so unstable it could detonate without warning. One mistake could tear a crew apart instantly. Thousands of Chinese laborers carried much of this burden. They blasted tunnels through granite, survived avalanches, and worked in conditions many others refused to endure. Some froze to death in the high passes. Others disappeared beneath collapsing snow. But the mountains never surrendered easily. Every mile of track through the Sierra Nevada was paid for in exhaustion, frostbite, and blood. As the railroad pushed deeper into the continent, thousands of laborers began living beside the tracks in moving camps made of tents, mud, smoke, and exhaustion. The work never truly stopped. Hammers rang before sunrise. Locomotives screamed through the darkness long after nightfall. Entire towns seemed to appear beside the rails, then vanish again weeks later like drifting frontier ghosts. Many of the workers were Irish immigrants escaping poverty and war back in Europe. Others were Chinese laborers who faced brutal conditions for lower pay and little recognition. Together, they lifted rails, swung sledgehammers, hauled timber, and blasted through mountains under constant danger. Accidents became so common they barely slowed construction. Men were crushed beneath steel, killed in explosions, or buried during tunnel collapses. Yet the railroad kept consuming labor faster than crews could replace it. Along the plains, the camps also attracted gamblers, thieves, saloons, and violence. Some settlements became so lawless they earned the nickname Hell on Wheels. Fights erupted nightly. Gunfire echoed across the prairie. But every morning, the workers returned to the tracks. Because the railroad was no longer just being built, it was pulling the entire frontier behind it. As the rails stretched westward, the American frontier began changing faster than anyone could control. Towns that had once taken months to reach were suddenly connected by steel. Buffalo herds thundered away from the sound of locomotives. Telegraph wires followed the tracks like veins spreading across the continent, carrying messages in minutes that once took weeks. But not everyone saw the railroad as progress. For many Native American tribes, the Iron Road looked like an invasion, cutting directly through their world. Hunting grounds vanished beneath construction camps. Soldiers guarded the advancing tracks. With every mile completed, more settlers poured westward behind the locomotives. The frontier that had once felt endless was rapidly being divided, measured, and claimed. Even nature seemed to resist the railroad's advance. Blistering heat warped tracks across the plains, while violent storms flooded camps and ripped apart supply lines. Yet the crews continued driving forward with almost mechanical determination. The railroad had become larger than any one company or workforce. It was transforming the nation itself. And by 1869, the two lines were finally nearing each other in the empty wilderness of Utah, where one final ceremony would announce that America had changed forever. On May 10, 1869, crowds gathered at Promontory Summit beneath a wide desert sky as the two railroads finally faced one another. After years of explosions, avalanches, exhaustion, and death, the tracks of the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific Railroad had reached the same point on the continent. Only a single rail remained unfinished. Photographers moved through the crowd while executives posed beside polished locomotives draped in flags. Workers who had spent years laying the track stood nearby, covered in dust and soot, watching wealthy investors prepare to celebrate the victory. Then came the ceremonial golden spike. When the hammer finally struck, telegraph operators waiting across the nation transmitted the message instantly. Done. In that moment, the United States changed size forever. A journey that once took months by wagon could now be crossed in days. Oceans were connected, trade exploded, cities expanded. The frontier itself suddenly felt smaller beneath the weight of steel and steam. But beneath the celebration lingered a quieter truth. The railroad had united America, while also transforming it into something entirely new. The Transcontinental Railroad did more than connect two coasts. It reshaped the destiny of the United States, with iron, smoke, and relentless speed. Almost overnight, the nation began moving differently. Goods crossed the continent faster than ever before. Families traveled west in numbers once thought impossible. New towns appeared beside the rails, while others withered away in silence, bypassed by the engines roaring toward the Pacific. The railroad became the spine of a rapidly industrializing America, but every mile carried a cost. The frontier that had once felt wild and distant began disappearing beneath expansion. Buffalo herds collapsed. Native American tribes were pushed farther from lands they had known for generations. Workers who helped build the railroad, especially Chinese laborers, were often forgotten once the final spike was driven. Yet the tracks remained. Even today, modern rail lines still follow parts of the path first carved through mountains, deserts, and plains in the 1860s. What began as an impossible dream became a machine powerful enough to pull an entire nation into a new century. Before the railroad, America felt endless. After it, the continent suddenly felt conquerable.